Jesus, we have. I want you to turn to Matthew chapter 5. Thank you for your patience. We want to look at verse 27 again, and we're just going to read two verses. We're also going to deal a little and tie into the Genesis account, so you may want to have Genesis chapter 2 and 3 available, for that so easily fits into and gives us insight into the context of what Jesus is talking to us about. So Matthew chapter 5, verse 27. You have heard it was said to those of old, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. I want to go back and give you the premise of the Sermon on the Mount again, and it's not because you're ignorant, it's not because you can't get it, it's not because you haven't gotten it, it's because of me. I need to constantly come back to this premise in order to live in this premise, in order to let my life vibrate in this premise, to be constantly aware of this premise, or I go astray. And the premise is very basic. It's chapter 5, verse 3. It's the first beatitude. It's you are poor in spirit. It's your absolute helplessness. And he's whacking you on the back saying, congratulations for your helplessness. You're absolutely poor in spirit. You have no resource at all. If I slit you down the middle and open you up at the core of your system, there is nothing there, nothing available for you. You are absolutely helpless at the core of your system. You can camouflage that. You can make yourself feel good. You can hit a ball over the fence. You can do all kinds of things and make yourself feel like you are adequate in some areas while not in others. But the core of your life, you are totally inadequate. And if you will embrace that, if you will put a boundary around that and live in that, never get out of that, never get cocky, never step aside from that, never ever think, I can handle this. Always live in your helplessness. He will come in his amazing resource, the nature of his being, the fullness of his person, and literally merge with you. Not touch you, not give you a belief system. The person of Jesus, the living, functioning essence of the nature of God, will literally merge with your being, and you and him will become one, acting as one, thinking as one. You will have the mind of Christ. You will know the wisdom of the divine. He will literally flow through you, take you to a whole new level of living. Oh, who wouldn't want that? Wouldn't everybody want that? Living in your helplessness, embraced by his person. Wow. He says that is compared to the old covenant. The old covenant, which is verse 20, of course, of chapter 5, which is the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees, he says, this exceeds that. And if you could see it in the Greek, you would know that it says exceeds twice. It's exceedingly exceeds. It's just overwhelming. It's just so far beyond. It's just that the two can't even be compared. It's ridiculous. It's just the smallness compared to the hugeness. It's the little thing compared to the great thing. It's just overwhelming. Two levels. And you get to choose in which one you want to live. Embrace your helplessness. Let him merge with you and live in a level. Live like you can't live. Be what you can't be. Think like you can't think. Know what you can't know. Love like you can't love. Look at yourself and say, whoa, how am I doing this? And know all the time you're not. It's the merger. And yet you are, because you're in the middle of it. And it isn't that you are important. You are important. Do you realize how unique you are in this? Your DNA is different than anybody else's. Your fingerprints are different than anybody else's. Have you looked at your face? Nobody looks like you. God has gone to overwhelming involvement to shape a unique individual like you so that he might merge with you and give a demonstration of the essence of his being that nobody else can give. This is not cookie stamps. This is not, this is, wow, you're significant. Live on this level. I know he says you didn't get that, so I want to give you some examples. And he begins with this first one, which he gives 6 of them. And the first one, of course, is murder. The old timer said, you shall not murder, and whoever murders is in danger of the judgment. The old timer said, hey, I got all these feelings, all this emotion, all this stuff going inside of me. What am I supposed to do with it? Well, put a lid on it. Discipline yourself. Take a cold shower. Learn to count to 10. Take an anger management class. Whew. Draw a line. Put a boundary around it. Can't just let your temper get out of control. Come on. Jesus said, how would you go for this? Eliminate anger. Eliminate hatred. Not control it, not manage it, eliminate it. Well, that's impossible. Nobody can. I'm only a human being, and I have bad days. I know, which only proves the point. You're totally helpless. You can't pull this off. So would you merge? Would you merge and let something happen in you that takes, you understand that murder in the physical, anger, hatred in the spiritual. So anger and hatred in the spiritual is equal to murder in the physical. So spiritual murder is anger and hate, demeaning, belittling. Come on, could we merge? Brings us to the second example, which we're trying to deal with. You have heard it said by those of old, you shall not commit adultery. The old timer said, my sexual drive is an appetite over in the corner. I got lots of appetites. This is one of them. Hey, you can't just let any appetite run wild. You got to control it. Hey, weight thing, eating too much. Come on. You got to bring things under a balance, and you got to bring your sexual drive under control. And after all, and for the sake of family and society, and come on, you can't just let the thing run wild. So what's the boundary? What's the lid? What's the limit you're going to put on your sexual drive? Well, don't cheat on your wife. It's the commandment. Everything else is up for grabs. Just don't cheat on your wife. Jesus said, look at this. But I say to you, I want to talk about that again tonight. I say to you. If you could see this in the original language, you would know that the word say has the word I in it. It's like the Spanish language. It has at the ending of the verb, the pronoun I, the masculine singular pronoun I. So it's there. I say, in one word. But the word I is there separately. Ego, E-G-O, is there separately. So it's really there twice. So what it literally says is, I say to you. There's a strong emphasis on who's talking to you. Who would have the nerve to stand up and say this? Come on, in front of a whole crowd? Because nobody's ever lived like this. Come on. Nobody's ever met this standard. Who would have the nerve to look anybody in the eye and say, here's how you ought to live? And then propose this idea? Who is saying that? Well, you could say God is speaking, and he is, no question about that. God is saying this, no doubt. But Jesus is not approaching this from the position of God is saying this to you, although that's involved. You see, Jesus is God. We talked about this the other day. Want to be sure you get it. Jesus is God, absolutely. Fight for that. We'll not give that up. There's lots of things I don't care about, but that I really care about. Hey, step outside. I'll shed blood over that. I won't let you belittle that. Jesus is God. He's always God. He never gives up being God. Every time you see him, he's God. When he's dying on a cross, he's God, because if he isn't God, hey, his death means nothing. It's the death of another nice guy, and lots of nice guys die. I'm going to. But it doesn't do anything for me. The reason Jesus is so significant is he is God. But you understand the dynamic of that. The second member of the Trinity, who is God, set aside, emptied himself, Philippians 2, emptied himself. Have you got that? Emptied himself, gave up everything that makes him different from you. Do you know what that would be like? I'm not belittling a cross. Nailed through the hand. Ooh, that must have hurt. Stripes on the back. Absolutely. Whoa. I have no concept of what that would be like. Not belittling that at all. But in light of the second member of the Trinity, God leaping off his throne and becoming a helpless babe and giving up everything he had. You can give up what you have without giving up who you are. I shake your hand. I'm shaking you. Well, not really. Yeah, I'm shaking you. Well, your hand is you. Well, no, it's not you. It's an extension of you. Yeah, you can cut off your hand and still be you. Because you're not a hand. Jesus took everything that he had as God, set it aside, and became a helpless babe in his mother's womb. And embraced that helplessness. Had no edge on you. And embraced that helplessness. And merged with the nature of God. And became the first man and the one who's standing up saying, hey, let me tell you how to ought to live. Let me give you 6 examples. Let me tell you about not just don't murder. Let me tell you about eliminate hate, eliminate anger, eliminate demeaning. Let me talk to you about sexuality. The one who's standing up talking to you about that is a helpless man, the first one who's merged and lived it. Do you realize that merger never went away? See, it's one thing for Jesus to leap off his throne, empty himself of all that he has as God, and become a helpless babe, and be a man, be in the flesh for 33 years, then pop back, be what he was. That's one thing. It's another thing for him to never, ever, ever. Do you realize he was raised from the dead in the merger? Do you realize you taught me this, folks? Come on, don't look at me like that. You taught me this. He's coming back in the merger. And when I see him, he'll be in the merger. It was an eternal sacrifice. That's the one who's talking to you. Talking to me. And what does he have to say? But I say to you that whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Now, I suggested to you last night that this is the only illustration out of the 6 that he uses the idea of the heart, brings the heart front and center. Like somehow in this illustration, the heart concept becomes absolutely essential because it literally spills out of this illustration and goes into all the other illustrations that he wants to give. And he says, what I'm talking about is you old timers, you want to say it's just your sex drive is just an appetite over here in the corner. I want to talk to you about what's at the core of your life. I want to take a knife and slice you down the middle, and I want to go to the core of your existence. What makes you who you are? Again, what do you call that? One reference to it in the scriptures is the heart. Leviticus 17:11, life is in the blood. So obviously the Hebrew concept was, since life is in the blood comes out of the heart, comes back to the heart. So the heart is the symbol of the core essence of what makes you who you are. It produces you. Everything that spills out of you, for out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, Jesus said. It's the heart thing. This is the core. So now we're going down to the very core, not superficial, not outside, not what my hand does, not where my foot goes. We're talking about the heart, the heartbeat of my system. And he says, you know what's there in the heartbeat of your system? You know what intertwines the whole heartbeat of your system? Sexuality. Come on, you can't put this thing over here in a corner like it's one thing among many. Don't you understand? It's at the core throb of your being. And your sexuality has influence in every facet of your existence. was a startling idea to me. Again, the way I walk, affected by my sexuality. The way I approach life, the way I solve problems, affected by my sexuality. What TV shows I like, affected by my sexuality. How I drive my car, affected by my sexuality. My eating habits and the way I eat, affected by my sexuality. Whiskers on my chin, sexuality. Everything about me is affected by masculinity. How do you get away from that? He said, that's what I'm talking about. That's at the core of your system. Now, what would happen? Think about this. What would happen if in your helplessness at the core of your life, which is lined with your sexuality and determines how you view things, what would happen if the core of your life, lined with your sexuality, you would merge? And your sexuality would take on the tone of Jesus. So that the total expression of your sexuality would all be under the control of, and the thought process of, and have the viewpoint of, and what you saw would be Him. Well, that would change everything. Well, suppose I don't do that. What's the option? Oh, well, that's easy. If you're helpless, absolutely helpless, and you do not merge with Him, what have you got left? A helpless person acting like they're not helpless. Do you know how ridiculous that is? Have you ever gone to the fair and had an artist draw your face? You know, the cartoon kind of thing. They enlarge the nose, which wouldn't be, never mind. So, you know, you got this, and it looks, well, it doesn't look like, but that's what you'd look like. You'd be a Looney Tune. You're a helpless individual, acting like you're not helpless. You're a person that was built to be dependent, acting like you're not. And we in the Church of the Nazarene call that carnality, because it's demonic nature. You've thought this through, haven't you? Sure you have. Hey, Jesus, the Spirit of Jesus, He is omnipresent. So He can fill you and He can fill me. You can merge with Him, I can merge with Him. And the same Jesus that lives in you is the same Jesus that lives in me. Woo-hoo, isn't that a deal and a half? Because He's omnipresent and we can embrace Him. But the devil, folks, is not omnipresent. He's a created being, an angelic host, part of the angelic host. We got that. He's a fast mover, but he's not omnipresent. So probably the real devil, the real person of the devil, has never ever worked on you. He has demons. I got that. How many does he have? I don't know. I have no idea. Are the demons multiplying so that there's one for every person that is born? I doubt it. I don't know anything about that. So how can, you mean I'm demon possessed? No. But see that, you don't have to be demon possessed. See, what the devil wants is for you to think like he thinks. And a helpless man who won't embrace his helplessness, who acts like he's not helpless, is so full of himself that he has demonic thought process. So the demonic nature is expressed. And it's called carnality. It's called self-centeredness. It's a helpless man who won't admit he's helpless. And can you imagine at the core of your system being absolutely filled with yourself, absolutely relying on yourself, absolutely wrapped up in yourself, all your desires, all you want, wrapped up in your own self-centeredness, giving expression to self-centeredness, and that literally infiltrates your whole sexuality and the way you view things. For instance, if my walk is determined by my masculinity and I don't walk like my wife, what would happen if my walk was filled with self-centeredness? We got a guy down at our church. I can't do this very well, but he walks like this. He is so full of himself. It is all over him. Somebody said about him, he even struts when he sits. What's that all about? Why is he that way? The guy that says, well, I'll tell you, I'm in charge of this house, and we're going to do it. Where does that come from? The guy that said, you park in my parking spot and I'll knife your tires. Whoa. See, we're not talking about some sex drive over here. We're talking about a sexuality that literally brings a viewpoint of self-centeredness that affects every aspect of your living. Let me take you to Genesis. I want you to see this. Let me walk you through this. And not that you haven't already seen it, but wow. Look at chapter 3. We talked a little bit about this the other night, but in chapter 3, you've got this temptation thing going. And Satan was more cunning in verse 1 than all the beasts of the field and which the Lord had made. And the devil gets into a conversation with Eve. And says, has God indeed, this is verse 1, has God indeed said, you shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, we may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, don't eat it, don't touch it, lest you die. That's what God said. The serpent said to the woman, verse 4, you're not going to die, come on. God knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes, viewpoint again, will be open. You will be like God, knowing good and evil. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit and ate. She gave to her husband with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves covering. Now watch this, verse 8. They heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God among the trees of the garden. Then the Lord God called to Adam and said, where are you? And he said, look at verse 10, I heard your voice in the garden. I was afraid because I was naked and I hid myself. And he said, who told you? Who told you? Who told you you were naked? Oh, nobody told him. Well, what's happened? He's changed here. And that's changed his the way he sees things. Have you ever proposed the idea that why didn't God at this point, at this junction, why didn't God come along and say, hey, you've messed up, bad time, but listen, it's okay, I'm creative, I'll just put the fruit back on the tree. Oh, there it is, okay. And hey, well, I'll just pat you on the head because I'm a God of forgiveness. I just forgive. And he does. He is forgiving. Did you know every sin is forgivable? Do you know God forgives time after time after time after time, and there's never a time he won't forgive? Do you understand that Jesus said, there is no sin God won't forgive? So why didn't he just come pat Adam on the head? Oh, I forgive you. Well, act like it didn't happen. Put the fruit back on the tree. Woo! All is good. Let's play chess. Why didn't he do that? Car problems. Hate car problems. Transmission. Stuck in reverse. Have to back everywhere I go. So I decided one day I'm going to fix that thing. You know what I did? Changed my spark plugs. Did it help? No. Why not? It's not a spark plug problem. It's a transmission problem. See, does God forgive? Absolutely. You mess up, does God forgive? Well, yeah, absolutely. Hey, you do the wrong thing, does God? Absolutely. He'll forgive you. Will He always forgive? Absolutely. Is there anything He won't forgive? No. He forgives everything. There's no problem with forgiveness, people. But listen, we've got a transmission problem going on here that forgiveness doesn't fix. And what man needs is not forgiveness, he needs forgiveness. But he needs a radical revolution at the core of his nature. And without that, he'll go on seeing the way he's always seen, doing what he's always done, acting the way he's always acted. Hey, his sexuality will be filled with the same old self-centeredness unless there is a radical internal nature. God is on a redemptive plan, not just to forgive people, but to radically transform them and bring them back to what He intended them to be inside before. Thrilled with your recovery program. We have a transitional house, part of our church. We got a separate building. We house 12 guys in that building. We got some houses, which as a second stage, and we house guys in that. And they're coming out of drugs. They're coming out of jail. They're coming out of whatever. And we're trying to get them back on their feet. We get them a job. We take them to their job. We're interested in that. We're trying to bring them into Jesus. But you know what we discover time after time after time after time? It's not a drug problem. It's not an alcohol problem. It's not a pornography problem. It's a transmission problem. And unless sometime in the course of this whole thing, they come to grips with not, oh, I want to go to heaven. They come to grips with not, oh, God forgive me. They come to grips with, oh, I took another drink, God forgive me. Unless they come to grips with what they are inside and the radical, they have a confrontation with the person of Jesus and His nature, and they come into their helplessness, embrace that thing, and allow Him to come and radically change them at the core of their system and merge at the depth of their being. They don't have a chance. So merger is not just a pat on the head. See, what we're talking about is your life, His life, your life coming together until the core is altered. Now, as you progress with this idea, I want you to back up to chapter 2. God has created man in chapter 2, and all the animals, and everything has sexuality. All the animals, sexuality, and what God does, according to verse 7, He formed man out of the dust of the ground, breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, man became a living being. Okay, man is created. God plants this garden, has the whole thing set up, all the animals are there, and He took man in verse 15, you'll see, then the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to tend and keep it. And He gave him this one commandment, verse 16. The Lord God commanded the man, saying, for every tree of the garden you may eat freely, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. For in that day you eat of it, you will surely die. Didn't tell that to the woman. She isn't even around. Told it to the man. In fact, Adam named all the animals. Can you see him? Here he is in the garden. Everything around him has sexuality. All the animals, male and female. All the plant life, male and female. There's sexuality everywhere in everything God created, except him. Now, you could push the point, he has sexuality, masculinity, but there's no femininity. And you know that everything God created, God said, did good, did good. All through the creation, hey, I did good. Oh, this is good. Oh, that's good. Oh, I did good on that one. Look at verse 18, chapter 2. And the Lord said, not good. Looked at man and said, not good. This is not good. Well, what's not good? no sexuality. Sexuality is not complete. Not good. So he says, I will make him a helper. Now latch onto that one. So he's going to make this woman and she's going to be a helper. Well, bless God, that woman's supposed to help me. Whoa, you don't want to go there. Trust me. Do you know in the book of Psalms, God is called a helper to Israel? Which means if your wife is a helper, she's God in your home. Oh, brother. So don't even go there. Just ignore that one. Comparable. See, this is not about who's going to run the show thing. This is about roles. Masculinity and femininity. In oneness of flesh. So God says, not good. I'm going to take care of this. And look at verse 21. This is so neat. The Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall on Adam, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs, closed up the flesh in its place. Then the rib which the Lord God had taken from him, he made into a woman, and he brought her to man. Now the old boy is just awakened, and here stands God with this woman that he just made. And Adam breaks into this poem. This is now bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man. Oh, you didn't get it. This is bone of my bone. The Hebrew word is estim. It means substance of self. He's literally saying, oh, self of myself. If you put that into proper English, it would be, he wakes up, sees this woman and says, she is me. That's me. What would that do to my, forget you, but what would that do to my whole relationship with my wife if I considered her me? In fact, look at the next verse. Look at the very next verse. The very next verse says, verse 24, therefore, based upon that, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And the whole one flesh. And why would he put that in there? What? Because Adam doesn't have any dad to leave, and Eve doesn't have any father or mother to leave, so there's no. He's setting a pattern. So the whole idea is that a oneness of flesh takes place in sexuality. See, this is, Paul in Ephesians 5 just got into this heavy and began to talk about the whole relationship of husband and wife, and in other places the whole sexuality thing as some phenomenal mystery, that when you want to talk about the mystery of Christ and the merger, how do you discuss that whole thing? You discuss it in the same pattern that you discuss the oneness of flesh between husband and wife. That there is a spiritual quality to this whole she is me idea that is so. Do you understand that in spiritual warfare, everybody who knows anything about spiritual warfare knows that the easiest way to pass a demon from one person to another is sexuality, sexual intimacy. Because there's something, it's not just a physical deal. It's not just it's at the core of your, which spills through your whole, which gives you your And this is not just some body drive to be satisfied. And a guy came up to me and said, hey, Manly, it's all right for me to lust for my wife, isn't it? Well, no, it's not. The very essence of lust is self-centeredness that wants its own way. And that can't be pleasant any place, outside of marriage, inside of marriage, because this is my helplessness. And if my wife becomes an individual that I use, I've got glorified, I've just got legalized prostitution on my hands, which is misses the whole dynamic of It's interesting that this second illustration that we've been dealing with and are dealing with, the third illustration is about divorce and marriage. And when that subject is brought up, Jesus doesn't even discuss it. It's really interesting. You know what he discusses in that passage, in that illustration? He discusses the issue of, I want to talk to you about what you're causing. When could I divorce my wife? I want to talk to you about what you're causing in your wife. What are you causing? What are you talking about? Hey, come on. I come home, had a rough day, I'm all upset, boss is mean, come home, what do I do? Take it out on my wife. What am I causing? How does she respond to that? Well, she gets mad. So now I'm mad, she's upset, I'm upset. What did I just cause? And Jesus goes into this whole idea. Are you taking your wife and are you taking your husband and are you just drawing them into prayer? Are you drawing them into godliness? Are you just drawing them into joy? Are you drawing them into peace? Are you drawing them into security? Are you building in your home such a presence in the merger, in the loss of your life and his presence in the merger until this new creature is just living in this house and just exposing this atmosphere and you're just drawing your wife into this? Have you ever had sexual intimacy with your wife, and while you were doing that, while you were in the very act of doing that, you prayed that God would take all the oneness of himself that you experience and pour it into her? Oh, let me take you back to the temptation. Chapter 3. We walk through it. Well, let me add one thought. So the woman is there, the devil is talking to the woman. All that time, Adam was there. Never said a word. Don't you feel like going up to him and say, hey, boy, get on your feet. The devil is talking to your wife. Go get in the middle of that thing, boy. What are you doing just sitting there sucking your thumb? Get in there. Have input into this. Protect her. He didn't. She picked. She gave to him. Now, do you understand? He's in an overwhelming dilemma. She's just entered into sin. He hasn't. Now, he's got a choice. What's the choice? Merging with him or her? Well, who is her? She is me. So I've got a choice between him and me. Does that sound familiar to you? What if Adam, think about this. I don't know, but think about this. Wouldn't it have been something if Adam would have said, hey, I'm choosing him. And he would have become the sinless redeemer to save his wife. But see, he couldn't imagine living without her because she is me. He couldn't imagine living without himself. Oh, so he chose her against God and ended up losing both of them. So, here we are. What's the bottom line? What are you going to do about the homosexual? I don't know. What are you going to do about the guy who thinks he's a girl? I have no idea. I'm not intelligent enough to even discuss it. What are you going to do about the same-sex marriage? What are you going to do about the alcoholic? What are you going to do about the druggie? What are you going to do about pornography? What are you going to do about adultery? What are you going to do about cussing? What are you going to do about any of it? I don't know. I only know, ladies and gentlemen, that's not the issue. You know what the issue is? Right here, the core of my life.